You are about to buy a motorcycle that could either run for 500,000 miles or blow itself apart before you even finish the first payment. And the terrifying part? Both engines can look almost identical sitting side by side in a listing. One is a legendary power plant mechanics worship, the other is a ticking time bomb with a nickname like the Widowmaker. Today, we are exposing 7 of the worst engines ever bolted into a motorcycle, then counting down 9 that will genuinely outlive you. Let's get into it. Cracking under pressure at number 7, Aprilia RSV4 Early V4. Aprilia took their MotoGP-derived know-how and jammed it into a street bike between 2009 and 2012. On paper, it was a masterpiece. In practice, early production runs had flawed valve guides and delicate cam chain tensioners that were never meant to survive daily street abuse. The result was sudden timing jumps, and in the worst cases, dropped valves that turned a track-bred masterpiece into a very expensive paperweight. A major valve adjustment paired with a tensioner update at a specialist shop runs $900 to $1,600. And that is assuming you catch the problem before it eats the engine. What makes this one sting even more is where the engine came from. This V4 was developed directly for Aprilia's World Superbike racing program, meaning the road bike version was essentially a high-strung homologation engine wearing license plates. Before you buy one, ask for service records, proving the updated tensioner kit was installed. If the seller looks at you blankly, walk away. This bike rewards diligence and punishes ignorance in equal measure. Speaking of engines that punish ignorance, our next entry made an entire generation of Ducati owners intimately familiar with feeler gauges. Bleeding you dry at number 6, Ducati Panta-derived Desmo L Twin. This is the engine that built Ducati's reputation for being special and also for breaking your budget. Fitted to the Panta 500, the 600 TL, and the early 750 Supersport, this air-cooled Desmodromic L Twin used mechanically open and closed valves instead of springs. Sounds cool, sounds exotic, sounds expensive because it is. Early camshaft lobes wore down prematurely, and the shim tolerances were so micromanaged that skipping a service interval could send a valve straight into a piston. Every 3,000 to 6,000 miles, you are paying $600 to $1,100 just to keep the valves from eating themselves. If you are shopping one of these, insist on a full service history with dated shim adjustments. No paper trail means no purchase, full stop. And if you thought Italian complexity was scary, wait until you meet an American V-twin that turned its own timing chain into confetti. Before we go further, if engine horror stories like this are saving you from a very expensive mistake, hit subscribe right now. We publish these breakdowns every week, and subscribing means you never miss the one that saves your wallet. Choking silently. At number 5, Harley-Davidson Twin 𝐾𝐑. Between 1999 and 2006, Harley-Davidson equipped the Electric Glide, Road King, Softail, and Dyna families with the Twin 𝐾𝐑, an air-cooled 45-degree V-twin displacing roughly 1,450 cubic centimeters. The problem was inside the cam chest. Harley used spring-loaded plastic cam chain tensioner shoes. These shoes wore down rapidly and started flaking off, sending plastic debris directly into the oil pump. That starves the entire engine of oil pressure, and a starved Harley V-twin does not forgive you. What makes this particularly frustrating is that Harley had already solved this exact problem on earlier engines using solid, non-plastic tensioner designs. Fixing it properly means upgrading to a permanent hydraulic tensioner plate or a full gear drive camshaft kit, which runs $1,000 to $2,000 in parts and labor. Before buying, pull the oil filter and inspect it for plastic shavings, or ask the seller to do it in front of you. It is a 5-minute check that can save you a 5-figure engine rebuild. Plastic parts inside an American V-twin were bad enough. Our next entry proves that even the Japanese, usually the gold standard of reliability, had an absolute stinker in the lineup, leaking everywhere. At number 4, Honda CX500 Early V-twin. Between 1978 and 1982, Honda built the original CX500, a liquid-cooled 80-degree longitudinal crankshaft V-twin fitted to the CX500, the CX500 Custom, and the GL500 Silverwing. This bike earned the nickname the Plastic Maggot for its bizarre looks, but the real horror story is under the bodywork. Early units suffered simultaneous stator insulation burnout, mechanical water pump seal failures, and automatic cam chain tensioner snaps all at once. Mechanics started calling the fix the triple bypass because you basically have to pull the whole engine to address all three problems together. Ironically, this same engine family went on to become a favorite among motorcycle couriers in Europe, precisely because later revisions fixed all three flaws and the bike proved nearly indestructible once sorted. The early 1978 through 1982 units are the ones you need to worry about. Anything built after the running changes largely avoided the triple bypass curse. That distinction matters enormously when you are staring at a listing because two visually identical CX500s from different production years can have completely different reliability outcomes. That triple bypass repair runs $800 to $1,400 today at a specialty shop. Before you buy one, ask specifically whether the stator, water pump seal, and cam chain tensioner have already been replaced. If the answer is no to even one of those, budget the repair into your offer. Sticking with unpredictable power delivery, our next engine earned a nickname so ominous that riders still repeat it 50 years later. Snapping violently at number 3, Kawasaki H2 Mach 4, two-stroke. Built between 1972 and 1975, the air-cooled three-cylinder piston port two-stroke inside the H2 Mach 4 750 made 74 horsepower in a chassis that could barely handle 40. The power band was violently narrow. Below a certain RPM, you had almost nothing, and then the power arrived all at once, like someone flipped a light switch. This sudden surge routinely overwhelmed the bike's flexible frame and its genuinely weak drum brakes, which is exactly how this machine earned the nickname the Widowmaker. What is fascinating in a slightly terrifying way is that Kawasaki engineers knew about the frame flex problem before the bike ever hit showrooms, and released it anyway because the horsepower numbers were simply too good to hold back in the middle of the early 70s horsepower wars. A full crank rebuild with the vintage center seal replacement and a carburetor rebuild runs $1,200 to $2,200 today. If you are hunting one of these as a collector's piece, and we understand the appeal, have the crankshaft seals inspected before you even think about starting it. This is not a bike you learn to ride. It is a bike you survive. Speaking of surviving, our next entry has an ironic name considering how often the metal underneath it cracked. Marking territory at number 2, Harley-Davidson Ironhead Sportster. Produced from 1957 all the way through 1985, the Ironhead is an air-cooled 45-degree V-twin with cast iron cylinder heads fitted to the Sportster XL, XLH, and XLCH. Here's the fundamental design flaw. Iron heads bolted to aluminum crankcases expand at different rates as the engine heats up. That mismatch created chronic, severe oil leaks that Harley owners simply learned to live with, alongside a weak generator charging system and a brittle valve train that demanded frequent top-end teardowns. There is an old joke among vintage Harley owners that an iron head does not leak oil, it marks its territory, and that joke exists for a reason. Resealing the top end, replacing base gaskets, and tuning the valve train properly runs $600 to $1,200. If you are shopping one, check underneath the bike for fresh oil spots at every viewing, not just the first one. These engines mark their territory constantly, and a seller can wipe a leak clean right before you show up. Now we arrive at the absolute worst offender on this entire list, a bike so notoriously unpredictable that even seasoned adventure riders approach it with genuine caution. Shaking apart at number 1, KTM pre-2007 LC4 single. Built between 1987 and 2006, this liquid-cooled single overhead cam, 4-valve single-cylinder engine displacing between 400 and 625 cubic centimeters powered the 620 Duke, the 640 Adventure, and the 640 LC4 Enduro. A big single is supposed to be simple and tough. This one was neither. Extreme primary vibration was so severe, it routinely shook chassis bolts completely loose while you were riding, and that same vibration caused premature failure of the main crank bearings. On top of that, these engines were notorious for heavy oil consumption and leaking head gaskets that never seemed to fully seal. The irony here is that KTM built this engine specifically for off-road competition, where a single big-bore piston delivers exactly the low-end torque that hard enduro riding demands. But scaling a competition-bred single up to 625 cubic centimeters pushed the primary balance of the engine to its absolute limit, and KTM never fully solved the vibration problem until they redesigned the entire LC4 platform after 2007 with a proper balanced shaft. That later redesign is genuinely excellent and does not belong anywhere near this list, which makes the production year on any listing you look at absolutely critical information, replacing the main crank or camshaft bearings and refreshing the top-end seals. Typically runs $800 to $1,500, and that is before you deal with the loose bolts, shaking your headlight bracket off on the highway. Before buying, physically check every visible chassis bolt for loose or retorqued threads, because if the bolts are loose now, they were loose for the entire time the previous owner rode it. 7 engines down. 7 reasons to walk away from certain listings without a second thought. But enough doom and gloom. Let's flip the script completely and talk about the engines that will genuinely outlive you. Surviving anything at number 9. Honda Super Cub Single. We are starting the best list with the most underrated entry on Earth. The Honda Super Cub uses an air-cooled single overhead cam, 2-valve horizontal single ranging from 49 to 125 cubic centimeters, and it powers the Super Cub, the Passport, the Trail 125, and the Grom. This is, quite simply, the highest production internal combustion engine in human history. The top end is deliberately understressed, and the centrifugal clutch is so robust that the engine keeps running reliably even when riders forget to check the oil for months at a time. Honda has now built well over 100 million Super Cubs worldwide, more than any other single motor vehicle ever produced by anyone, including every car ever made by any single manufacturer. In parts of Southeast Asia, this exact engine architecture, essentially unchanged in its fundamentals for decades, is used as delivery transportation for entire families, groceries, livestock, and furniture, often simultaneously and often with zero scheduled maintenance beyond fuel and the occasional oil top-up. That kind of abuse tolerance is not an accident. It is the entire design philosophy of the engine distilled into 2 wheels. A full valve adjustment and oil screen cleaning, on the rare occasion it is even needed, costs $80 to $150. Before buying a used Cub, just check that the centrifugal clutch engages smoothly with no shuddering. That is the only real weak point, and it is a cheap fix, even if it needs attention. If a tiny commuter single can be this bulletproof, imagine what happens when Suzuki applies the same philosophy to a proper sport bike engine. Bulletproofing boldly at number 8, Suzuki GS Series Inline 4. Produced from 1976 through the 1990s, the air and oil-cooled DOHC Inline 4 in the Suzuki GS Series ranged from 550 to 1,100 cubic centimeters, and it powered the GS 750, the GS 1000, and the GS 1100. Suzuki built these with highly overbuilt roller-bearing crankshafts and cylinder walls so thick that drag racers routinely bolt on turbochargers, and the bottom end simply refuses to let go. This is one of the most abused, most modified, and most surviving engine families in motorcycling history. The GS Series actually has a fascinating footnote in racing history too. A modified GS 1000 was famously used in early production-based endurance racing, and its bulletproof reputation in that punishing environment is exactly why the aftermarket drag racing and turbocharging scene adopted it so enthusiastically decades later. There is a reason you still see GS-based turbo builds putting down absurd horsepower numbers at dyno days today, running on internals that are, in some cases, 40 years old and have never been touched beyond routine oil changes. A standard valve shim adjustment and carburetor synchronization runs $300 to $550, and that is basically the only maintenance this thing ever asks for. Before you buy, check for signs of turbo or nitrous modification in the listing history. It is not automatically a deal breaker, since these bottom ends can genuinely handle it, but you want to know exactly what you are inheriting. Suzuki proved Big Fours could be tough. Honda's answer was to put gears where everyone else used a belt, and the result became legendary. Timing it perfectly at number 7, Honda VFR 750 and 800 gear-driven V4. Between 1986 and 2001, Honda's 90-degree V4, displacing either 748 or 781 cubic centimeters, powered the VFR 750F, the VFR 800Fi, and the legendary RC30 Racer. Instead of a rubber belt or a chain to drive the camshafts, Honda used precisely machined gears. That single decision eliminated the #1 timing failure point found in nearly every other sport bike of the era, and it gave the engine that iconic mechanical gear whine that VFR owners will talk your ear off about at any gas station. The RC30 version of this engine is particularly special since it was built as a homologation special specifically to compete in World Superbike racing, and it absolutely dominated early seasons of that championship. Some of that racing DNA trickled directly down into the street VFR, which is part of why this engine has such an outsized reputation relative to its relatively modest horsepower figures. Riders who commute daily on a VFR from this era routinely report crossing well over 100,000 miles with nothing more than fluid changes and the occasional valve check, a claim that is difficult to make about most sport bikes of any era. A thorough valve adjustment on this tightly packaged V4 requires significant labor, averaging $600 to $1,000 since everything is packed in tight. Before buying, listen closely at idle for that distinct gear whine. If it sounds like a normal chain-driven engine instead, something is off, and you need a mechanic to look closer. Reliability does not always mean complexity, though. Sometimes the smartest engineering is knowing exactly what to leave out. Breathing effortlessly at number 6, BMW Airhead Boxer Twin. Fitted across the Type 247 family from 1969 to 1996, this air-cooled, pushrod, horizontally opposed flat twin ranged from 498 to 980 cubic centimeters, and it powered the R50/5, the R75/5, the RA80G/S, and the R100RS. The cylinders stick straight out into the wind on both sides, which means cooling is basically automatic and effortless. Combine that with a genuinely simple shaft drive system, and you get an engine that regularly crosses 200,000 miles using little more than basic hand tools for roadside fixes, even in the middle of nowhere. The R80G/S in particular has a special claim to fame, since it won the grueling Paris-Dakar rally multiple times in the 1980s, proving this exact engine architecture could survive weeks of desert abuse at a stretch without specialized tools or a support crew nearby. That rally pedigree is a big part of why the modern adventure bike category exists at all, and why BMW's current GS lineup still traces its lineage directly back to this humble air-cooled twin. Simple valve adjustments and carburetor tune-ups run $200 to $400, while pushrod tube seal replacement, the most common age-related leak, runs $350 to $600. Before buying, check both pushrod tubes for fresh oil weeping. It is a known wear item, but it is also a cheap fix that should not scare you off an otherwise excellent bike. If you want simplicity taken to its logical extreme, our next entry strips the whole formula down to just one cylinder and sends it anywhere on Earth. Real quick before we continue, if this list has already changed your mind about a bike you were considering, hit that like button. It genuinely helps this video reach other riders who are about to make the same expensive mistake you almost avoided. Wandering fearlessly at number 5, Kawasaki KLR 650 single. Produced from 1987 to present across 3 generations, the liquid-cooled DOHC 4-valve single-cylinder thumper displaces 651 cubic centimeters and powers, unsurprisingly, the Kawasaki KLR 650. This engine was built with genuinely loose, forgiving mechanical tolerances on purpose. That sounds like a flaw until you realize it means the bike can run on low-octane fuel and survive in genuinely harsh environments across the globe on minimal maintenance. Overlanders have ridden these things across continents with nothing but a tool roll and stubbornness. Aid organizations and international relief agencies have relied on this exact engine platform for decades to reach remote areas where paved roads simply do not exist, and where a broken-down vehicle could mean serious delays getting supplies to people who need them. That real-world track record, in genuinely brutal conditions with untrained mechanics doing field repairs, is a far more convincing reliability test than anything a manufacturer could run on a dyno. The first generation KLR from 1987 through 2007 and the second generation model share enough parts commonality that spares remain cheap and plentiful even today. The one known weak point is the counterbalancer chain tensioner, nicknamed the 𝐑𝐄𝐑 by the enormous online community around this bike. Getting it upgraded at an independent shop, if you skip the DIY route, runs $300 to $500. Before buying, simply ask the seller directly whether the 𝐑𝐄𝐑 upgrade has been done. It is such a well-known fix that any legitimate KLR seller should have an immediate answer. Simplicity is great for adventure, but what if you want that same bulletproof philosophy applied to a genuinely fun street twin? Balancing naturally at number 4. Suzuki SV6 50 V-Twin. Since 1999, Suzuki's liquid-cooled DOHC 90-degree V-Twin, displacing 645 cubic centimeters, has powered the SV650, the V-Strom 650, and the Gladius. The 90-degree layout is the secret here. It naturally cancels out secondary engine vibrations without needing a heavy internal balance shaft, which means less mass, less complexity, and one fewer thing to eventually wear out. Combine that with a genuinely durable piston skirt design and a tough valve train, and you get an engine that new riders can learn on and never outgrow mechanically. This engine has quietly become one of the most raced platforms in amateur club racing anywhere in the world, largely because a stock bottom end can survive an entire season of being redlined on a racetrack with nothing more than fresh oil between rounds. That kind of grassroots racing pedigree rarely gets the spotlight compared to flashy, factory-backed programs. But it says everything about how genuinely tough this small V-twin actually is under real competitive stress, not just gentle commuting. The standard major valve adjustment service interval averages $400 to $700, which is remarkably reasonable for a V-twin of any kind. Before buying, check that the recommended valve service has been kept up on schedule, since this is the one place owners occasionally get lazy on an otherwise low-maintenance bike. If this list is helping you shop smarter this summer, tap that like button right now, because it tells the algorithm to put these breakdowns in front of more riders who need them just as much as you did. Refining quietly at number 3, Yamaha CP2 Parallel Twin. Since 2014, Yamaha's liquid-cooled DOHC 8-valve parallel twin with its signature 270-degree crankshaft displacing 689 cubic centimeters has powered the MT-07, the Tenere 700, the XSR 700, and the YZF-R7. That 270-degree crank gives this engine a V-twin, like power, pulse, and character, without the added mechanical complexity of an actual V-twin. Yamaha paired it with exceptional cylinder wall design and minimal internal friction, resulting in an engine that delivers strong low-end torque while remaining virtually unbreakable, even under sustained stunting or heavy off-road abuse. What is remarkable about this engine is how recently it was designed, using decades of accumulated lessons from every parallel twin and V-twin that came before it, without inheriting any of their compromises. Yamaha engineers specifically targeted a low center of gravity and a genuinely narrow physical footprint, which is part of why this same basic engine architecture has been stretched, bored, and adapted into so many completely different motorcycles across Yamaha's current lineup. From adventure bikes to naked street fighters to full sport bikes, all sharing the same fundamentally sound bottom end. The primary 24,000-mile valve clearance adjustment and spark plug swap costs $350 to $600. Making long-term ownership costs genuinely low. Before buying, verify the mileage against the last documented valve service, since this engine is so reliable that owners sometimes lose track of when service is actually due. Reliability and character are great, but our next entry is the engine that basically invented the modern retro twin movement. Smoothing it out at number 2, Triumph Bonneville Parallel Twin. Built from 2001 through 2015, in its air and oil-cooled form, this DOHC parallel twin, displacing either 790 or 865 cubic centimeters, powers the Bonneville T100, the Thruxton 865, and the Scrambler. Vintage British twins were famous for case-cracking vibration that shook engines apart from the inside. Triumph solved that permanently with twin-gear-driven balance shafts, completely eliminating the historical vibration problem while retaining that classic British twin character everyone actually wants. The result is modern, genuinely under-stressed reliability wrapped in nostalgic bodywork. This engine effectively single-handedly revived Triumph as a serious manufacturer, since the original Bonneville name had carried decades of baggage from the brand's near collapse in the 1980s. Engineers deliberately visited old Bonneville owners and enthusiast clubs during development, gathering feedback on exactly what character and sound the new engine needed to preserve, while quietly fixing every single mechanical weakness that had plagued the original. The result launched an entire modern retro category that competitors are still chasing today, decades later. Valve inspections paired with throttle body synchronization run $400 to $750, which is entirely reasonable for a bike this characterful. Before buying, start the bike cold and listen for excessive mechanical rattle from the top end. A little clatter is normal on these, a lot is not. And now, the single greatest engine ever bolted into a production motorcycle. An engine so overbuilt, it borders on ridiculous, outlasting everyone at number 1. Honda Goldwing Flat 6, spanning the GL 1500 family, displacing 1,520 cubic centimeters from 1988 to 2000 and running a rubber timing belt, and the GL 1800 family, displacing 1,833 cubic centimeters from 2001 to present and switching to timing chains. This liquid-cooled, single overhead cam, horizontally opposed flat 6 powers the Goldwing, the Valkyrie, and the F6B. Honda built this engine to automotive-grade tolerances, running at incredibly low stress and low RPM ranges relative to its output. The result is an engine that routinely covers 300,000 to 500,000 miles without ever needing an internal rebuild. Let that number sink in. That is multiple times what most car engines are expected to deliver wrapped inside a two-wheel touring machine. Honda essentially borrowed its own automotive engineering division's philosophy wholesale for this project, treating the motorcycle less like a bike and more like a luxury sedan that happened to only have 2 wheels touching the ground. The 6-cylinder layout naturally produces smoother power delivery than any twin or 4 could manage, and Goldwing owners are famous within motorcycling circles for organizing cross-country group rides, specifically because their machines are trusted enough to handle thousands of highway miles back-to-back without anyone worrying about a roadside breakdown. A major service, including valve clearance checks, a genuinely complex air filter replacement, and full fluid flushes, runs $400 to $1,200, mostly because of the labor required to remove the extensive touring bodywork. Before buying, ask specifically for documented mileage against major service intervals, since these engines outlast owners so often that service records can genuinely span decades and multiple riders. 7 engines that will drain your wallet and your patience. 9 engines that will run circles around anything with a warranty sticker still attached. That is the entire spectrum of motorcycle reliability laid out side by side. And now you know exactly which listings deserve a second look and which ones deserve a screenshot straight to the trash folder. Click on the next video to continue the ride. Never buy the wrong bike again? Get your guide right now and subscribe to our channel.